Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, March 9th, 2017. I don't know. Things might be happening. I have no idea, really. I'll have to check online to see whether anything happened. And we'll catch up on those things if we feel like it, unless we just decide to spend 2 hours talking about, I don't know, let's see, the upcoming NFL draft. I don't know. And I don't know anything about that either. So we're not going anywhere with that one. What is happening this morning? Well, we have to check and see whether the congressional committees marking up the Republican health care bill have finally adjourned or not. They worked through the night in the Energy and Commerce Committee. Not that anything happened. I believe all the committees working on everything adjourned without passing any amendments whatsoever, despite having spent the entire night working on new ones, including some very entertaining ones that I know have caught Greg Dworkin's attention. We'll leave that out there for discussion later on. And let's see. Also, huge news. Ted Cruz and family, or at least part of the family, invited to the White House for dinner last night. It said in all the promotions of it that the Ted Cruz family was being invited over to the White House for dinner with the Donald Trump family. I don't know whether that meant they spent a couple $100,000 flying Melania down for dinner or not, so that Donald could compare the two of them side by side, as he did famously on Twitter during the campaign. Never really apologized to Ted Cruz about insulting his wife that way, nor insulting his dad and insinuating that he had somehow been involved in the plot to assassinate Kennedy. And Senator Cruz's dad, not invited to the dinner, but apparently one of his younger daughters did manage to bring a stuffed giraffe, so they had space for that one in the White House. Look, what can you do? Post-election, weird things happen. People develop relationships. I don't know. And I guess that's the big, this is the charm offensive. I don't know if that's what this is related to, this invitation to Cruz to come over for dinner. But there's there's speculation that there is still room for a charm offensive of some kind. I don't know if Donald Trump is capable of pulling off such an offensive, but he's certainly capable of pulling off being offensive. We know that much. But if he were to throw his weight, and he's got some, as it turns out, behind the passage of this health care bill by endorsing it, as he reportedly did yesterday, or was the House Republican Conference was told that he was fully behind it in their meeting on the subject the other day. If he were to throw his lobbying weight behind it and to make it clear that it's either oppose the Trump juggernaut or get on the bandwagon, then it's entirely possible that they might be able to pull things together and at least get this thing through the House. Although, really, the numbers were looking pretty bad. He's going to have to move a lot of people, and I'm not entirely certain that enough hardliner Tea Party alumni and, I guess more to the point, Freedom Caucus folks believe that he holds more sway in their districts than they do. They may be wrong about that, but there's a certain conceit that goes with serving in these offices that very often will lead them to believe that they have the finger on the pulse of their district that the president couldn't possibly. Sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. We'll have to wait and see, but we probably won't have to wait all that long if yesterday's committee procedure is any indication. And, of course, there's interest in getting this thing over and done with before the CBO can manage to come up with a score for the thing. And I guess that was a good point that Joan was making yesterday. I suppose they don't have to wait to be asked to score the thing. Now that the text is available, they can download it just like anybody else and give it their best shot. How long it would take them to get through a bill like that, and score it, I have no idea. But I would guess that there's some chance. It's Thursday. They're not going to be voting on this thing anytime real soon, I don't think. So they may be able to squeeze out a score after all. And that would leave just enough time for the Republicans in the House to dispute the score and say you're lying and it's fake news, and see how well that works. And then they can go home for the weekend and test that out. So there's plenty to look forward to covering today, and some of it will bear directly on this still emerging healthcare bill. Other piece of big news today, the thing a lot of people are talking about, ProPublica out with a very enterprising report. They they have kept an eye on that area of government staffing on which none of the rest of us have kept an eye. We have all had our eyes on the cabinet confirmation process, and with good reason. And of course, we have discussed a number of times on the show the number of offices around the federal government that are filled by the president, by appointment, and the number of those appointments subject to Senate confirmation, and how you can, in fact, eat up an entire Congress if you want to, just on the confirmation process alone. But we've begun to get hints along the way that it would at least be announced as White House strategy, or thinking anyway, that maybe we don't want to fill all these positions. But it's not the case that they don't want to fill any positions. And so what they have done in the meantime is they've to build on their metaphor, landed what they call beachhead teams in all of the government departments, I guess at least all the government departments that they care to actually exert some control in, and have put in what are essentially temporary assignments, temporary appointments to positions, some of which will not require any sort of Senate confirmation, and some of which may eventually require some Senate confirmation. But they're putting their people in positions that ordinarily, by the way, don't have a great deal of official leverage. In many cases, statutorily, the decision-making authority inside of an executive department is granted to people who hold certain titles. And sometimes acting title holders can make those decisions on behalf of actual confirmed, Senate-confirmed title holders, sometimes not. But in the meantime, what they've done is they've parked a team of several hundred, in some cases, real weirdo conservative alt-right activists occupy these jobs. In some cases, Trump organization loyalists. And look, they're doing the work that ought to be done by people who are subject to Senate confirmation, and they're doing it without much notice. So ProPublica has done us a great service here in cataloging as many of them as they could find. It's very interesting the process they had to go through, and really interesting how secretive these people and the administration are being about who are public employees. I mean, these are public government employees. They're getting paid out of taxpayer funds. They're doing the people's business, such as it is, and getting paid for it. And it's actually been quite difficult for ProPublica to find out who are they. Just hand over the payroll records and we'll be able to find out. And that's eventually what they had to do. So it's very interesting what they found. We'll go through a couple of those things. Something to keep an eye on for sure. And they knew it, and that's why they did the work. All right. Greg Dworkin joins us this morning with his roundup of things that are actually important. That is important too, of course, and I bet that's in the roundup somewhere. But okay, Greg, what have you got for us this morning?
Well, we got a lot of stuff, yeah. And that is important. I vaguely remember the Bush administration doing something similar in the sense that each department had some political minders.
They all do, yeah.
They're stuck there so that it could be ideologically pure. So more in the first than the second administration. But at the very beginning, something along those lines happened. So I don't know how unusual it is. Some of these guys are right out of high school, apparently.
That's a little unusual. I will say this: it's something that every new administration has to do because you can't get all those people in place and confirmed quickly. It's just that this particular administration has a real coalition provisional authority tinge to it.
Yeah, if you have somebody right out of high school, it's really unclear as to what kind of expert they are on the topic that they're supposed to be minding, but, there it is.
Yeah, well, maybe they're going to have a dance or something.
Right. So, apparently, at least Ways and Means and some of the other committees, were looking at the health care bill last night and in the wee hours decided not to do much about it. They just went ahead and approved it so that they can move it down the line. But that last piece that I have on your list of things I sent you had one kind of funny piece here.
All right.
And that was Crowley of New York, where this Democrat offered a unacceptable amendment to the House committee, and the amendment happened to be the exact amendment that a Republican had offered way back at the time. Texas Representative Kevin Brady, who happens to be chair of the Ways and Means Committee, had proposed to the Affordable Care Act in 2009 that every member of the House voting on the health care bill issue an official statement indicating he or she had read the legislation in its entirety.
Yeah.
So Joe Crowley of New York decided to offer the same amendment. I don't mean similar amendment. I mean the same amendment. I mean taking the exact amendment, crossing off Brady's name and writing his own name, Crowley of New York, in crayon on it, and offering that. And so I sent a picture of that actual process happening. And there was another copy of the new amendment present in the committee, according to this Vox story, printed on a large poster board that was passed down the dais to Brady himself. And although they struck the amendment down on a point of order, it was very good.
I think, well done there. The Vox reporters refer to it as trolling, and I guess it is. It made me think of it. Now I've got a song stuck in my head when you said they passed it down the dais, and now I have Rock Me Amadeus in my head.
Right,
so,
but here's the quote. A point of order on the amendment, not because of the rich irony my friend talked about. It's very rich. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a goofy amendment when Brady offered it. It's goofy here too now, but at least it was offered ironically this time, whereas the first time.
That's the whole point. Everything you guys said that was important isn't important, and everything you said isn't important is important. And so let's be real about what's going on here is his point. And I think everybody on the committee kind of got that. But
who cares?
It really gets down to this really fascinating dynamic that's going on. And I'm listening to the pundits try to analyze this morning, and there's basically two camps. Mm-hmm. There's the camp that says this isn't going anywhere, and people have constructed it in such a way that it doesn't. Predominantly, as we started to talk about yesterday, by letting the Senate kill it so that the House gets away with not having a deal. And the other is that, no, you don't understand. It looks like it's not going anywhere, but with all the pressure and all the Trump, charm offensive and this, that, and everything else, something actually is going to come out of here, and it'll surprise you. So it's going to be one of those two things. David Frum leads this is the exit ramp for Republicans kind of thing, and he gives Rand Paul in the Senate as a great example. And he says, look, take Rand Paul, for example, because you talked about in your introduction the idea that some of the Republican House members may have a better finger on the pulse for their districts than the president. That does happen at times. And what happens with Rand Paul is that in some of the districts in Kentucky, where he got, 60, 70, 80% of the vote, Rand Paul did, 1 out of 5 of the constituents are on Medicaid.
Yes.
So you can't just go ahead and take it away and reduce Medicaid. You can't just do that because your constituents will kill you, and he knows it.
Well, okay then.
So he needs a way out. So how does he do it? He says it doesn't go far enough.
I see.
That way he protects himself from, being primaried on the right, but still gets to kill the bill.
Yeah.
And there are others in the Freedom Caucus who will do exactly the same thing because they know the constituents would be the ones that are most harmed by it. In fact, there is data out there showing that it's the Trump Republicans that are most likely to be hurt by this, rural, older, Republicans, who are most likely to be hurt by the new bill that they are proposing. So they feel like they have to do something, but they don't want to do this, and they're looking for a way out, and that's the way out. The other side of it, I see a whole bunch of reporters, Chris Hayes, Sam Stein, saying, no, you just don't appreciate the fact that what they say and what they do isn't the same thing, in the sense that they say they're opposing it, but there's a lot of pressure to get together and actually do something. So we'll see. John Boehner had a lot of trouble pulling together the fractious caucus. I don't know that Paul Ryan is going to have any better luck, because if it fails, it falls on Ryan, not the members. And so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get the take, and it's not a bad one, that Trump can have an impact here. It's always the case that the president can step in and throw some weight around and try and change some votes, and I'm sure that he can. And I guess as between the two parties, I rarely think that Republicans really know their district all that well versus an operator like Trump. You can never tell exactly. But that largely comes from the fact that they just run their campaign in a box from the national party headquarters, and they don't necessarily know all that much about what people are thinking there. But on the other hand, the idea that Trump can do this by sweet talking, and maybe that's just not his approach. Maybe he just does the bullying approach. It has yet to be demonstrated that he has any skills in that.
Well, we'll see how well he does with this, because this is complex, and there's a lot of things that are going on here. All of the medical establishment, whether it's the hospitals, the American Medical Association, everybody's opposing this. Yeah. And so what's really going on here? Josh Barrow has a nice piece in Business Insider about some of the stuff that's going on here.
Okay.
Although Josh can be a pain in the butt sometimes, he's very good with numbers. So here's what he says. Obamacare was financed by raising taxes and cutting Medicare.
Yes.
So Republicans decried the tax increases, and they decried the Medicare cuts even more loudly. But because Republicans mostly acknowledged the need to maintain some sort of health insurance subsidy as a replacement for Obamacare, and that's the part yesterday we said, Philip Klein said, see, the liberals have won because Republicans do acknowledge that, which will cost money. They won't be able to undo all the tax increases and all the Medicare cuts without exploding the deficit. But Republicans are also opposed to deficits. You see their dilemma there. Now that Republicans run the government, we're seeing which set of concerns they choose to prioritize given limited available resources.
Yes.
The unsurprising answer is that Republicans will make a priority of repealing substantially all the tax increases in Obamacare, most of which fall on people who make over $200,000 a year. If House Speaker Paul Ryan gets his way, people who hated Obamacare because of the taxes will get everything they want, or nearly everything they wanted. But much of the rest of the law will stay in place. And people who hated the law for non-tax reasons, they thought insurance premiums were too high, they didn't like being penalized for not having insurance, they didn't like cuts to Medicare, they mostly won't get what they're expecting. And a lot of those are Republicans. And so Ryan has set it up so that the rich donors get what they want, but the vast majority of Republican voters don't. And how does that fly over time? And that's what comes back to the constituents in the individual House districts, because it isn't just a question of I promised you I was going to repeal Obamacare and here it is. It's I'm taking away stuff you have and I'm going to make you like it.
Yes.
Well, that usually doesn't go very well.
It usually doesn't. But somebody could be using the wrong bathroom somewhere.
Right. So he goes on to say, you'll see Republican leaders argue that various factors constrain what Republicans can deliver. Take this plan because it's better than the status quo and we can do more later. The question is better for who?
Mm-hmm. Well, we know who.
Right? Who has to lose? Millions will lose their health insurance. There's no restoration of Medicare benefits to the seniors who were activated to vote Republican over Medicare cuts in the 2010 election. But some groups didn't have to compromise. Wealthy people, medical device manufacturers, tanning salons, pharmaceutical companies.
Yes.
And here you have the populist Republican Party, and the rich guys are the ones that win, and the poor guys are the people that lose.
Yes. Tanning was a big point yesterday. A lot of people talking about the tanning taxes.
Well, obviously, there's lobby money going into people getting rid of those. And besides, it's a tax, and business people hate taxes.
Well, sure. But, well.
Election have consequences, and yeah, shut up, you're a Democrat. Right, here's a good one. This is Derek Thompson. And this is a series of tweets. I sent you this chart.
Let's see.
It's part of your list here. Easily one of the country's most undercovered stories up until now.
Oh.
Right?
Well, all right. Now it's
what
covered.
happened over the last 8 years is how remarkable the last few years have been for low-income wage growth. EPI's new State of American Wages finds that lower unemployment and higher minimum wages are pushing wage growth. And he gives a reference. And he says, look at this.
What a disaster.
Wage growth in 2015 and 2016 was higher for the bottom 30% than for the top 10% or the top 5%. The bottom 30% had 2.8% rise in wages. The bottom 20th% had 6.4. And the top 90th had 2.3, and the top 95th had 1.7. So on a percentage basis, it was actually, the economy has been very good for the low-income earner. Now, that's going to change.
Yeah, we better change that. Come on.
Because the Republicans want to rectify this gross injustice.
It is horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, and everybody who isn't a 1%er voted for him. You scratch your head and say, what is going on here? So there's that as part of the background. We have a piece here from the New York Times. Health bill clears House panel in pre-dawn hours. We talked about that a little bit.
Yes, okay, so.
From the Ways and Means Committee. But the thing is, we have Tom Cotton, of all people, senator.
Right.
Tweeting, House health care bill can't pass the Senate without major changes. To my friends in the House, pause, start over, get it right. Don't do it too fast. The GOP, he says, shouldn't act like Democrats did in Ocare. They took 6 months. Cotton claims they did it overnight.
Yes.
Maybe for Congress 6 months is overnight. I don't know.
When you lose, it seems that way.
What matters in the long run is better, more affordable health care for Americans, not House leaders' arbitrary legislative calendar. So it's basically a shot across the bow saying, in my constituency, remember, Tom Cotton was one of the people that was hammered in those town halls.
Yes.
He was the one that had somebody stand up there and say, where do you get your insurance, Senator?
Right.
It was painful. They had to sit there and take it for 30 minutes. So does that make it different ultimately? Usually it doesn't. It's good theater. But maybe it does.
Well, you can hope. But yeah, when push comes to shove, he usually shows up for his team. But it's interesting to see him say that on a number of fronts, not the least of which is I did see his remarks retweeted and commented on by one of the new Dems in the House saying, he's exactly right. We shouldn't do things this way, but missing the opportunity to say, well, you're exactly right about how process should work. You're exactly wrong about how you think democratic process did work.
Yeah,
but
pretty
okay.
much. But that's
Other
okay.
than that-
I mean, and again, Cotton is one of the fringe guys. It's not like he's one of the core people who you expected to vote against it. But the fact that he's out there, this again may be his way of protecting his own rural constituency by claiming things that aren't true just so he could vote against it, because when you vote against it, they don't really care why you did it.
Right, just so long as you do. All right, well, that's a face-saving measure for him.
Yeah. So again, points to the group of people who say, no, it's going to die in the Senate, as opposed to the people who say, no, something will come about because in the end everybody will compromise because this is their last chance. Now, here's a different angle altogether, which I thought was very interesting, from Patrick Egan.
Okay.
From political scientist at NYU. And he writes, is it possible that the Supreme Court is a cause of the GOP opposition we're seeing to a rollback of the ACA's Medicaid expansion? Now, here's his thinking. It's very interesting. Here's the logic. Okay. In NFIB v. Sebelius, the Supreme Court ruled that states could not be coerced into expanding eligibility for Medicaid. Couldn't be done at the federal level, had to be done at the state level.
All right.
Most blue states responded by expanding Medicaid under the generous terms established by the Affordable Care Act. And most red states rejected it. But a few GOP governors, often at a fair amount of political cost, played ball. They had to make the case to voters and fellow representatives. Arkansas was one of them. What would have been automatic in red states before NFIB versus Sebelius only got accomplished with buy-in from Republican elected officials in those few red states that actually did stuff like that. Think John Kasich in Ohio, for example, arguing about why it was necessary to expand. This is Hutchinson in Arkansas. I mean, there's a group of people who actually went ahead and did this. This created policy lock-in effects that are stronger in these states than they would have been under a 50-state expansion. In other words, because they decided to do it at home with Republican votes, and they had to go and justify to Republican voters, as well as people in their own state legislators, why they were doing this.
Okay.
That was a stronger argument for why it should stay than having it, imposed from federal level, even though the effect was the same.
I see.
So that may help explain why the GOP replacement bill is already encountering opposition from Republicans from states that expanded. And Cotton is an expansion state. In some, a SCOTUS ruling that made Medicaid expansion optional, which was a big defeat for the Affordable Care at the time, may actually be one of the reasons why the GOP is divided on Medicaid expansion today, causing problems at as the party tries to repeal.
Well, that is a very political scientist way of looking at it.
Yeah, what do you think?
I can buy it. I mean, it's not a strategy you can duplicate, but I mean, it happened, and I mean, I guess you'd have to look across the board and see whether you get and push will have to come to shove. If Cotton votes no, that means something. The fact that he's saying no, I mean, it is explainable.
He could be a Susan Collins kind of thing and just, making a lot of noise.
But I guess that's an interesting way, of backing into the situation. I guess if Republican-led expansion state senators, and I mean, I guess you would expect the same from representatives, but I don't know if we're seeing it yet.
Yeah. Alaska, Arkansas, Ohio, places like that.
I guess there'd have to be a real clear delineation between expansion states and non-expansion states. But it's a good theory, the idea that Republicans at one point had to explain this to people, and if they're still in office, will have a difficult time reversing. Although I would think that there's plenty of room for. Yeah, well, at the time it sounded like a good idea, but now we've seen it's such a disaster. So, but no one stumbled upon that position yet. That's certainly an interesting thought. It's a good one to entertain until voting time, I guess.
Right.
And then when we
at
see
least
what happens,
keep an eye on it and get an idea whether or not that's the case. Now, here's another idea about what sort of opposition the Republicans may come up with when they're starting to look at this. They've got, here's one from Vox. These GOP voters hate Obamacare. They hate the new replacement bill, too. And it's Tea Party people who are unhappy about the size of the deductible that they have to pay. And then there's a second group of people who are unhappy because they feel like they might lose their care. And this just talks with them and interviews them and gets their views on paper. But the concept there is there's a whole lot of constituency who vote GOP who are going to be unhappy with this. And to drive home that point, this is a tweet from AARP advocates. Okay. And they are AARP, and here is the tweet. And this is going to be commercials. You can start to see the commercials they're actually making in the tweet. The age tax would force Americans aged 50 to 64 to pay thousands of dollars more for health care. Tell Congress no age tax.
Age tax, that's cute.
That's what they're going to call it. And they've got a whole commercial about how that works, with a guy explaining that, if you're older, you're going to have to pay more, and that's no good. And we're AARP, we're on your side. Tell Congress not to.
All right. That's the sort of thing that would probably work.
And those are Republicans.
Yeah.
Older voters. Just saying.
Why those crazy? Okay. Yeah, well, that's the sort of thing that very often works on them. I mean, you do have to pay more for health insurance when you're older.
You do, compared to younger, because you're sicker. So that's part of the deal. I put that tweet at the bottom. It's in there, but I put it right at the bottom. Yeah. And even silently, without listening to the sound, you can look at the 1-minute ad that they have playing there and how the guy explains with a chart and, all sorts of
in theory,
outdoorsy stuff in theory, why this is bad for constituents. And so this is something that Republican reps are going to be hearing about.
All right. Well, good. I hope so. Yeah, I doubt very much whether I can play it without the sound. But I know it's technically possible.
Well, when you look at it just as a tweet, usually the sound starts off.
Oh, that's true. Well, let's see. I don't know.
So, Jim Acosta writes, Trump told Tea Party groups at the White House if the GOP health care plan dies, he will let Obamacare fail and let Democrats take the blame.
Oh, yeah, he will?
Yeah, that's what he said. And Matt Iglesias heard that and said, how does this persuade nervous Republicans to vote for Trump care?
I am not sure.
Their constituents aren't going to care about who you blame. They're going to care about the fact that you took this away from them.
Yeah. I also don't know that Trump is just going to be able to say, this is actually Democrats' fault. Everything was going along. We had to try and stop the disaster. And then we didn't try and stop the disaster. And then the disaster came, so it's their fault.
Yeah.
Well, of course, he probably won't put it that way.
Right. Anyway, so that's the summary for this morning about what's going on with all of the healthcare stuff. The Russia stuff is still percolating out there.
Yes.
I got an article here for you. I thought you might find interesting, especially I just added it at the very, very bottom.
Yeah.
It's by one Sarah Binder. Always interesting.
Which one? This
is why the Republicans struggle over Obamacare, and she talks about some of the procedural things that are ahead of trying to get rid of it that are going to be difficult to overcome.
Yeah, I saw her tweet about it, and I think she linked to the wrong article originally. I clicked through, and I said, well, this is interesting, but this is, I think, about, I don't know,
right,
some kid's project or something.
But this is the correct article. So
okay, good. I was glad to see that one.
Very bottom of your screen, you'll find it there.
I see it. Okay. So, yeah, a little bit more expansion on, I think, on the Vox piece about reconciliation that we saw yesterday.
Right. But we like Sarah. She's good.
Yes. And she's
All
not
right.
at Vox. So
and then the very, very last piece I'm going to give you, this is intriguing and also worth thinking about. This is from Ex Post Factoid.
Okay, let's see. I saw that one.
And says, Psst, Democrats, help Republicans out of the repeal box. Consider supporting Cassidy Collins.
Okay. What's
right,
that?
Well, it's the Patient Freedom Act.
Oh, wow.
Introduced in late January by Cassidy and Collins, co-sponsored by Capito and Isaacson.
I see.
Okay. And here's the deal. He says,
all right.
The Patient Freedom Act, or the PFA, sets up an alternative structure to the Affordable Care Act marketplace that states can opt into, which channels subsidy money into health savings accounts rather than exchanges.
Oh.
Now, wait. To be spent in a deregulated insurance market in which catastrophic health plans figure prominently. Okay? So the PFA is noteworthy for what it doesn't do. It doesn't repeal the Affordable Care Act. It preserves the taxes that fund Affordable Care Act benefits. It allows states to continue Medicaid expansion, if they wish, with the ACA's income-based premium subsidies and coverage rules if they want to. So the advantages of the PFA from Cassidy and Collins is that it leaves a lot of the Affordable Care Act structure there. Now, he points out, ex post factoid does, and he knows his stuff when it comes to these individual insurance issues here. The alternative health savings account-centric coverage is pretty toxic to Democrats. Moreover, the bill is something of an incoherent mess with a host of ambiguities and a level of complexity that makes the Affordable Care Act look like a simple three-legged stool.
Okay.
Thinks that it can be implemented in its covered form. But his point is it might actually be the basis for compromise. You keep everything about the Affordable Care Act except the exchanges, and you substitute some other conservative thing for the exchanges and say, listen, at least it preserves everything else. And so maybe there's a possible compromise there down the road when Republicans realize they have to do something. So it's not anything that should be offered now, but it's one of those things. Remember, we mentioned it because we may come back to it. It's probably the only Republican bill out there that has some interest even for Democrats.
Yeah. Well, we'll point this out.
Right? And then he adds, in my view, Democrats should make this happen by engaging with Cassidy Collins, maybe at this stage in the quiet rooms of Mitt Romney's fond imagining. If the Republican center is not to hold, then the Republican left, such as it is, needs shoring up, and maybe this could do it. Well, Republicans are in a bind. Democrats need a health care truce as much as Republicans do. Without it, Republicans may well close their eyes and jump, if not this year, then next year, perhaps after expanding their Senate majority. Without it, Republican paralysis may collapse, and the Affordable Care Marketplace and wider individual market will collapse too. We'll be left with a nuclear blame war, dysfunctional, unrepealed Affordable Care Act. So if both sides need a deal, maybe this is the way to go.
Maybe.
In a world where deals are made. We realize we're not there.
Yeah. I'm just trying to... Did Maine do Medicaid expansion?
That's a Joan question. I don't know. We can look it up.
Yeah, or a Bill question. Maybe Bill knows. I'm trying to check that.
It's just hard to imagine he would have signed something.
Yeah, that's the thing.
All right, let's see. Say piece from the Bangor Daily News, which as soon as it loads, I might actually read.
My search seems to indicate that they didn't. Maine's, I have a Press Herald editorial here from May of last year. Maine's rejection of Medicaid expansion has high costs.
Yeah. It hasn't done. The page said Mainers are being misled by Medicaid expansion proponents about the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, and Maine doesn't qualify for the enhanced levels of federal funding, so they're not going to do it. That's what he said a day ago. I
bring that up, and now thinking back to Patrick Egan's theory here. The Collins in Cassidy Collins doesn't come from an expansion state, but she's staked out that position for herself.
Well, yeah, because she's what amounts to the Republican left, which is a center-right person who almost always votes with the party.
And in his second paragraph of the ex post factoid piece here, 4 senators have written a letter to Mitch McConnell, and he notes right here that these 4 senators are Republicans in states that have expanded Medicaid: Portman, Capito, Gardner, and Murkowski. So that would be Ohio, West Virginia, Gardner is Colorado, and Murkowski, Alaska.
Right.
So with the exception of Collins, who has her own independent reasons to have, and is safe in having staked out the position, I guess Egan's theory holds, at least here. So that's interesting. So good, we can sew those two things together.
Right. And Maine, actually, it's coming up a lot now.
Yeah.
Partly because of concerns about what this new bill means. So there's a new urgency in Maine to see if something can pass. Okay. So anyway, you put it all together, and it's actually an intriguing theory that we'll just have to continue to follow.
All right. I bet we will. I'll forget. But you'll remind
you.
Okay. That will work.
Okay.
That's fine.
By the way, you get your subscription to the New York Times? Yes, you did.
I did, right. You kept
reminding me.
See,
because I kept reminding you.
Right. It took me a while.
That's what friends are for.
First, I marked up the Washington Post one overnight, and then I Cassidy Collins this New York Times bit later on as a compromise. Mm-hmm. Okay. These things work.
They do.
Good
All right, I'll leave you with that, and then we'll see where we go from here. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning.
Hello.
And this is Thursday. Won't be here tomorrow, but we'll be back on Monday, and we'll see what happens. A whole lot might happen.
Yeah, there'll be angry tweets and all sorts of things, and we'll see if he can tweet a bill through the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
We'll okay, thanks, Greg.
Take care.
Take care. You do the same. Have a great weekend.
You too.
And bring us some good news and not a nuclear meltdown.
I would like that to happen. We'll see.
That would be great. We'll see. Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye. And let's see. Where do we want to go from this? This is a lot of things we can pick up on. Very interesting stuff. I think I am warming to the Egan thought process. The logic makes a good amount of sense. I don't know whether it sinks in a lot of heads. Sometimes it's hard to tell what people are thinking when they stake out these positions. But, I mean, it would have been easy to guess at Senator Collins being a part of this stuff, but I would not have picked out of a hat, I guess. Well, not Cassidy, and he's one of the lead sponsors. And Portman, I guess. If you had put the roll call to me here and said let me give you the names of Republican senators. Who do you think might align themselves with a compromise solution like Cassidy Collins? If we give you the Cassidy, and if you came to Portman, I'd say, yeah, maybe Portman. Capito. But it might strike me that, well, West Virginia is a kind of an odd duck in this. They did benefit greatly from Medicaid expansion. She might, yeah. Gardner, I would say, Capito, is that right? Yeah, well, in New Jersey, it's Capito. But okay, that's what happens when you get it in West Virginia. Dave Gilligan tells me Capito is pronounced Cap-ito, not emphasis on cap, short I. Yeah, Capito is from New Jersey, like I said. All right, but I might choose her. Gardner would have surprised me. Murkowski, I guess I could have guessed. So that's not too bad, right? I might have missed Gardner. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names. I pulled out of a hat. I might have given you Collins, Capito, Murkowski, maybe Portman. Maybe. I probably would have missed Portman because I don't remember him very often. Gardner, no, I don't think so. I probably would not have guessed that one. Okay, so surprising and maybe worth keeping an eye on then. Also worth keeping an eye on. Let's see. Lots of discussion of personnel issues this morning, not just from ProPublica, but I have something here from Axios, which I am guessing is a, oh my God, we got to win back the morning from ProPublica piece. So maybe we'll go with the original first. I don't know. It's a pretty large and expansive piece. They did an awful lot of research. I don't think that's necessarily something we can get all the way through, but I'll give you a couple of good examples. There's some really interesting things circulating, and this article has a lot of fans online and in the journalist community as well. I mean, I retweeted not ProPublica's own tweet on the subject, but David Farenthold's enthusiastic endorsement of it, and I think that carries some weight. ProPublica's piece here, written by Justin Elliott, Derek Kravitz, and Al Shaw. Meet the hundreds of officials Trump has quietly installed across the government. Right? We've been making sure that the installation of his cabinet takes a year and a day. But what about these guys? It says here, we have obtained a list of more than 400 Trump administration hires, including dozens of lobbyists, by the way, some from far-right media. And maybe those are the more concerning of the bunch. But yeah, so far, the draining of the swamp, not really working all that well. But, to his fans, they don't care. A Trump campaign aide, it reads, who argues that Democrats committed ethnic cleansing in a plot to liquidate the white working class. That's the kind of people they're planting in government here. Another example, a former reality show contestant, of course, and we're not talking about the president here, whose study of societal collapse, really, inspired him to invent a bow and arrow cum survivalist multi-tool. Okay, sure, why not? A pair of healthcare industry lobbyists, no surprise there, a lobbyist for defense contractors, an evangelist and lobbyist for Palantir, the Silicon Valley company with close ties to intelligence agencies, and a New Hampshire Trump supporter who has only recently graduated from high school. These are some of the people the Trump administration has hired for positions across the federal government, according to documents received by ProPublica, through public records requests. While President Trump has not moved to fill many jobs that require Senate confirmation, he has quietly installed hundreds of officials to serve as his eyes and ears at every major federal agency, from the Pentagon to the Department of the Interior. Unlike appointees exposed to the scrutiny of the Senate, members of these so-called beachhead teams have operated largely in the shadows, while with the White House declining to publicly reveal their identities. That's the really strange part here. Not that there are beachhead teams, and they do point out in the article that that's something that every incoming administration has to take advantage of to some extent. But declining to publicly reveal their identities, why? It's not a terrible imposition necessarily that they haven't, because the information is available, but I don't understand why people should have to crawl over broken glass to get it. Well, I do understand. They want to hide that because people will Google them and figure out who they are. While some of the names have previously dribbled out in the press, we are usually when they're being escorted from the White House for having failed their security clearances. Some of the names have previously dribbled out in the press. We are publishing a list of more than 400 hires, providing the most complete accounting so far of who Trump has brought into the federal government. And it looks like you can get a hold of the whole list. What is it? In what format have they given this list? There's another page that they link to here. Just right up the top. Here are more than 400 officials Trump has quietly deployed across the government. And it's some of the people have got, as they have here, noteworthy beachhead team hires have little photos and blurbs about their background. The rest of them are just sort of a list of, spreadsheet by agency, then the names of the people listed alphabetically, the position titles they get, the grade level, the government service level that they hold. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but government service employees, career employees get rank numbers, essentially. I think 1 through 15. GS 15 being the highest grade level of straight-ahead government service employees. They also have SES designations, which are senior executive service people who have been, perhaps in one agency, perhaps bouncing from agency to agency at a more senior level for a long time. There's an awful lot of them, and not all of them are going to ring bells, but I guess it's sort of a good group project there. If you have time, you can put your eyes on the list and see if there's anybody you recognize or can Google something up on. A lot of them will have hits and a lot of them won't. It's pretty interesting. And what's interesting is the titles that they hold too. Sometimes the titles don't mean a great deal, but I'll tell you what I'm talking about when we get down to the examples of some of the noteworthy job holders. It says here that these are some of the Trump people the Trump administration has hired for positions across the federal government, right? While President Trump has not moved to fill many of the jobs that require the Senate confirmation, these people he can just park there on his own. While some of the names have previously dribbled out in the press, remember, the White House was not particularly forthcoming with the names. The White House said in January that around 520 staffers were being hired for these beachhead teams. And the last we heard about them, they were just sort of incompetent. They had landed at these agencies and they either were asking, where's the bathroom, or had no questions whatsoever. Now we get to find out who are these people. The list we obtained, that would be ProPublica, includes obscure campaign staffers, contributors to Breitbart, and others who have embraced conspiracy theories, as well as dozens of Washington insiders who could be reasonably characterized as part of the swamp Trump pledged to drain. The list is striking for how many former lobbyists it contains. We found at least 36, spanning industries from health insurance and pharmaceuticals to construction, energy, and finance. Many of them lobbied in the same areas that are regulated by the agencies they have now joined. That figure is almost certainly an undercount, since we only included those who formally registered as lobbyists, a process increasingly avoided by many in Washington. During the campaign, Trump said he would have no problem banning lobbyists from his administration. He didn't go ahead and do it, but I'd have no problem with it. But they have nonetheless, they say, ended up in senior roles, aided by Trump's weakening of Obama-era ethics rules that modestly limited lobbyists' roles in government. The White House didn't respond to requests for comment. There are many former congressional staffers, several top officials from the George W. Bush administration, and even a handful of holdovers from the Obama administration. The list also includes at least 8 staffers drawn from the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank that forged close ties with the new administration during the transition, because they were the only ones who understood policy. Much about the role of the beachhead teams at various federal agencies is unclear, but close observers of the early weeks of the Trump administration believe they have taken on considerable influence in the absence of high-level political appointees. That's one of the dangers, I guess, of holding up nominations and the like is that instead your beachhead teams stay in place, and in the absence of anyone else who knows what they're doing or anyone else who will hold authority, they make the calls. There's really no way of preventing them from doing that, not without a majority in Congress anyway. But that's not to say that the strategy of dragging out the confirmation process is a problem. It's just, the alternative is speeding up the confirmation of terrible people who will hold statutory authority to do the things that these other people are doing by more questionable authority. So it's better that that occupy the time of the legislature and prevent a legislative agenda from being put into place while unelected and unconfirmed and unreviewed, unvetted people wreak havoc in the executive branch, because that was going to happen anyway, but at least they won't have new statutory authority to do more terrible things. All right, so where were we with this? The beachhead team members, I've skipped this bit here, so let's make sure we get this one. If the public and the Senate is in the dark about a team created without a Senate confirmation process, and they are, no one will be permitted to shed light on who is hopelessly conflicted or who is obviously unqualified, and who is both, said Jeff Hauser, director of the Revolving Door Project. Hi, Jeff. At the Center for Economic and Policy Research. The beachhead team members are temporary employees, serving for stints of 4 to 8 months. But many are expected to move into permanent jobs. The Trump administration's model is based on plans developed but never used by the unsuccessful presidential campaign of Mitt Romney. Interesting. What that means, essentially, is Trump did no transition planning of his own because he didn't believe he was going to win, and nobody did. And when he did win, he was left flat-footed and had no transition plan, so he took Mitt Romney's, basically, is what we're learning here. By the way, in terms of, I'm interested to see whether this explains the mechanics of things. There's a link here from the previous sentence that tells us that the beachhead team members are temporary employees. I'd like to see what that links to here. The CHCO Council. That's the Chief Human Capital Officers Council. I don't know what that is. But it says here, Temporary Transition Schedule C Authority and Temporary Transition Senior Executive Service Appointing Authorities. Interesting. After the inauguration on January 20th, federal departments and agencies are authorized to use the TTC authority. That would be, where do they designate that? Temporary Transition Schedule C authority. The TTC authority for a period of 1 year, beginning January 20th, 2017, or when a new agency head has entered on duty, whichever period is later. That according to 5 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, 5 CFR 213.3302, Section A. The number of TTC positions established by an agency cannot exceed either 50% of the highest number of permanent Schedule C positions. You get the idea. So there is statutory authority, and we can read up, hopefully off the air, about exactly what that authority is, so we can get a better feel for the scope of the president's power to do this without any kind of congressional review. Anyway, moving on here, after reiterating the point that this plan was stolen from Mitt Romney, who actually did the work, the poor ant whose plans were stolen by the Trumpian grasshopper. The beachhead teams involve people with considerable authority over federal government, said Max Stier, or perhaps Stier, S-T-I-E-R, the CEO of the Partnership for Public Service, a nonpartisan group that advises presidential candidates on smooth transitions. I guess they didn't talk to this guy. We need clarity about what they're doing and what their role is going to be. The Obama administration also hired temporary staffers after the inauguration, but Trump has brought in many more. The new list of names was provided to us, ProPublica that is, by the Office of Personnel Management, the government's human resources agency. We received additional names from other federal agencies in response to Freedom of Information Act requests. At least a few people on the list have changed agencies or left the administration, including, for example, the young Department of Housing and Urban Development staffer who was fired after his anti-Trump writings during the campaign came to light. That sort of thing is the focus of the Axios piece that I mentioned earlier. So here's a rundown on some of the Trump hires. So let's take a look at some of these. The Breitbart wing. And remember, again, I mean, everybody knows what bell is ringing when we say the Breitbart wing is going on. Of course, Steve Bannon, probably still CEO of Breitbart, though they deny it vehemently, parked in the White House as a senior advisor and, to my knowledge, still cohabiting in the Breitbart Embassy, the townhouse/mansion that they, I don't know whether they pay rent or what, that they occupy through the generosity of a very weird and mysterious Egyptian politician who loves them for unknown reasons. And prior to the election, Steve Bannon lived there, and they ran Breitbart out of the basement. And I don't know that it's any different now. I haven't heard anything. And I've put the question out there, and if you know better, please let me know. I'd love to know if he works in the White House by day and goes to live in the Breitbart offices by night. Presumably the Breitbart staff goes home at night, but hey, who knows? Anyway, among the Breitbart wing are Curtis Ellis. Now, these are names that, I don't know, maybe you've run across by reading weirdo conspiracy theory articles in the past, but I would guess that most of these names are probably new to you. Curtis Ellis was a columnist for WorldNet Daily. You know, we've heard of them. A website best known for its enthusiastic embrace of the false notion that President Obama was born outside the United States. A column headlined, "The Radical Left's Ethnic Cleansing of America," won Ellis an admiring interview with Steve Bannon, now Trump's top aide. He is a longtime critic of trade deals such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So what the hell, right? Ellis was hired on January 20th as a special assistant to the secretary at the Labor Department. Asked about his role in a brief phone interview Tuesday, he said, "Nothing I can tell you." Or I'd have to kill you. I'm not serious. Yes, I am. I don't know what that was about, but note for the record, he is drawing a columnist for WorldNet Daily, who believes in the radical left's ethnic cleansing of America, who convinced Bannon to hire him on day one, is drawing a government salary, which used to be anathema to them, of course, but now that it's going into my pocket, I'll take it. Drawing a government salary as special assistant to the Secretary of Labor. Noting therein, for the record, there is no Secretary of Labor. There's a second person who's been designated, who's now the Labor Secretary designee, Acosta, right? Not confirmed, not working, and who knows whether he's going to make it all the way through the process. After all, Puzder never did. So there is no Secretary of Labor. How does the Secretary of Labor have or pay a specialist? That's some kind of special assistant you've got there. He's assisting nobody in particular. Nobody's there. And there you have it. That's the sort of thing. Well, ordinarily that used to bother good government types, but good government types who are Republicans were only good government types because they were angry that Democrats occupied the government. Now that Republicans do, not so much. Well, there's another one from the Breitbart wing, John Perdue. There are several, actually. John Perdue, a self-described guerrilla warfare expert. Are we sure about that? And fellow at a little-known security think tank who wrote a book called The War of All the People, The Nexus of Latin American Radicalism and Middle Eastern Terrorism. It's a sleeper hit, this book, I'm sure. He is also a one-time contributor to Breitbart. I don't know if that's supposed to mean that he literally contributed one time, or he used to be a contributor to Breitbart. Let's see. It probably links to his Well, it does. It links to one particular article, so maybe only once. Purdue was featured on CNBC's reality series. I didn't even realize they had one. CNBC reality series called Make Me a Millionaire Inventor for his invention, the pack bow, which Purdue came up with while studying collapsed societies and what people who lived in those societies came up with to either defend themselves or to survive. I have a feeling that the actual collapsed societies that he studied, if he did, probably, I don't know whether they really were running around with these things, but this is a bow and arrow that doubles as a compass, a tent pole, a walking stick, a spearfishing rig, and water purification tablet receptacle. A water purification tablet receptacle? I mean, are we saying it's got a link here? I'm kind of curious. I don't think we're going to need one to survive. But a bow and arrow, okay, that doubles as a compass. You mean it has a compass glued to it, essentially? Or, that's sure they routed out a hole in the handle and stuck a compass in there. Doubles as a compass. It has a compass on it. A tent pole. Well, okay, I could see holding up a small one-person, possibly two-person tent built around sticking one end of your bow in the ground and throwing a sheet over the other end of the bow. Tent pole, all right. Walking stick, all right. If you can make a tent pole out of it, you can make a walking stick. You walk with the bow and stick one end in the ground and hold the other end. Spearfishing rig. My guess here, bow, arrow, string, or fishing line, right? You put some fishing line in there, tie it to the back of the arrow, shoot the fish with the arrow, pull it in. Spearfishing. Okay. So we glued a compass to it. We held it in one end of our hand. We put a sheet on top of it. We gave you some fishing line that goes along with, and, maybe there's a little, okay, moving on. And then you tie it to the arrow, and it's a spearfishing rig. And then water purification tablet receptacle. I'm getting the feeling here that perhaps the handle of the bow is hollow and has a little cap on it, and you can put water purification tablets in there. Not that you would purify water in the handle, but that later on, when you find some water, you want to purify the water, you need the tablets. Where did I put those tablets? I'm naked, so not a pocket, but I do have a combination bow and arrow and spearfishing rig, compass, tent pole, walking stick, and, lo and behold, in the little compartment where I have the fishing line that I use to turn this bow and arrow into a spearfishing rig, quote unquote, there's also some water purification tablets. Take it out. I don't know. Did he become a millionaire inventor? I guess he didn't make it to Shark Tank. So okay. Well, it is those things. Purdue was hired as a special assistant at the Treasury Department. They do have a secretary there, of course. The agency didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Now I'm just curious. We're going to follow the link and see about the pack bow here. There it is. It's got its own website, packbow.com. Another very inventive things. Get yours. Pre-order now. And it says right here, as seen on CNBC's Make Me a Millionaire Inventor. Why doesn't he have to divest from this while he's serving in the government? I don't know. Nobody has to divest from anything. The ultimate survival bow, it says, created by an expert in guerrilla warfare, which this is not, but okay. So very interesting. Okay, by the way, the bow itself is an interesting design. It's not a conventional recurved bow design. It's more like it's a stick with a gizmo in the middle that has a little hole in it that will allow the arrow and fletching to pass through it. It doesn't have a traditional, handle rest. And I guess it's got sort of these high tension elastics that attach to the top and bottom of the thing. You know what it looks like? It looks like a Tinker Toy bow and arrow. I mean, it looks like it'll work. I'm sure you can shoot things with it. I wouldn't want to get stuck with it. Have anybody shoot it at me, I'm sure. But you know what I'm talking about? If you're a kid and you made a bow and arrow out of Tinker Toys and you would attach the rubber bands to the top and bottom of longer pieces that you would put into one of those wooden hubs, but you'd take the one with the big fat hole in the middle and you could use the notch on a shorter piece to be the arrow and draw it with a rubber band attached to top and bottom and shoot it through the hole. It's designed like that. Seems to be inspired by that. So one end of the stick part of this thing has a spike on it, so you can use it as a walking stick or jab that into the ground to make a tent pole out of it. It's got 2 arrows. There's the compass. I see that. I think the compass is the top of the screw-on of the top of the compartment. The compartment where you can hold matches it's got there, and I guess also water purification tablets, which are not displayed, would go into this little compartment, which I think is the hole that the arrow will pass through later. So it's very nice, compact, and seems to be a well put together package. I don't know if that's $1 million idea, but that's neither here nor there. We're supposed to be talking about his government employment. And it's good that he's got government employment, because I don't think he's going to make it on this thing. But hey, who can say for sure? Okay, let's see. That's John Perdue. There's one other entrant in the Breitbart wing selected here that they've identified so far. John Jaggers is his name. He ran the Trump campaign in Maryland and Virginia, where he made headlines for endorsing the conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton was very, very sick and they're covering it up. As he put it in last August, the woman who seeks to be the first female president of the United States wears a wool coat at every single thing. Have you ever stopped to wonder why? It's a big deal, folks. Well, I guess he was wrong about that one, because she's still alive. Jaggers was hired January 20th as senior advisor to the General Services Administration, which oversees tens of billions of dollars of government procurement every year. But records show he left the job on March 3rd. He declined to comment. That is very interesting. By the way, also leaving the job over at GSA the other day, the person who oversees the contract for the D.C. Trump Hotel. That's what goes on at GSA, among other things. But they're responsible for that one. And I thought it was interesting. It did make the news the other day that this guy left without, of course, resolving the emoluments clause problem and the conflict of interest problem. But interestingly, even the true believer that the Trump campaign installed on January 20th left as well. I wonder what the hell's going on there. I wonder if this one will come back to us at some point. The next section that ProPublica's writers identify here, swamp denizens, including healthcare lobbyists hired by HHS Secretary Tom Price. We have Alexandra Campau, I'm guessing at the pronunciation, Campau, Campo, I would say if there was an E in there. Hired at the Department of Health and Human Services, formerly a lobbyist in Washington for the law firm Cozen O'Connor. According to disclosure records, her firm's clients included a licensee of insurance giant Blue Cross Blue Shield, and what's this? Fresenius Medical Care, a German company that specializes in medical supplies for renal dialysis. Super exciting. Let's see. Timothy Clark also fits in under this banner here of swamp denizens. Senior advisor to Price. He ran his own political consulting firm in California. Past clients including Pharma, the powerful trade group that represents the pharmaceutical industry. Kagan Lenahan, who's got his own link here to his LinkedIn page. How exciting for him. A senior advisor to Price, was a director of government relations at McKesson Specialty Health, a firm that supports independent health providers. That's anodyne sounding. Disclosure records show Lenahan directly lobbied HHS. For Lenahan, the new post represents a return trip through the revolving door between government and the private sector, and a reunion with an old boss. Before registering as a lobbyist, she was a senior legislative assistant for Price, who when the now HHS secretary was then in Congress. Asked about the 3 HHS staffers, an agency spokeswoman said, "We are not confirming or commenting on personnel at this time." There is Justin Mikolay, Mikolay, hired at the Department of Defense, previously a registered lobbyist for Palantir. His title at the tech firm was evangelist. I hate when they do that. Mikolay lobbied for the procurement/deployment of the Palantir government software platform throughout intelligence and defense agencies, according to disclosure records. He was also a speechwriter for Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta, interestingly enough, between 2011 and 2013, according to his LinkedIn profile. Michelet also previously served as a speechwriter for current Secretary of Defense James Mattis. He declined to comment. There is also Chad Wolf. Chad Wolf is a Bush-era Transportation Security Administration official turned lobbyist, currently serving as an advisor to the TSA at the Department of Homeland Security. His clients have included defense and homeland security contractors. Reached Tuesday, Wolf declined to comment. George Rogers, CEO of Wolf's lobbying firm, Wexler Walker, told ProPublica that Wolf is currently on unpaid leave. I don't think that's supposed to be the way it is. As we've previously reported, lobbyists for the construction industry, trade association, and financial services firm Transamerica are on the team at the Department of Labor, where there's no secretary. All right. Trump campaign vets, including very young ones, would be the next and last section of today's write-up on this subject. The list also includes what appears to be dozens of former Trump campaign staffers. No surprise, really, there. Including several who graduated from college last year. One, Danny Tiso, at the Department of Labor, graduated from high school in 2015, according to his LinkedIn profile. He worked for the Trump campaign in New Hampshire. Seth Harris, who was on the first Obama-Biden transition team and later became a top Labor Department official, said it's not uncommon to bring in campaign staff to agencies as long as there are senior political people there to direct the junior people. But there aren't. This is how you incorporate the people who are your strongest supporters into government, he said. There are plenty of junior jobs in the government that these people can do. Public affairs jobs, special assistant jobs, all that stuff. And all of that is very true, and every incoming administration will make great use of them. It looks kind of sleazy, and it is kind of sleazy, but that's not to be, it's not unexpected, right? You work on the campaign. People work on the campaigns for all sorts of reasons, including the idea that they'll get a job in an administration if they win. It's just usually you get a fairly low-level job and then not a tremendous amount of authority handed to you. But in the absence of secretaries, undersecretaries, deputy secretaries, etc., it turns out that a lot of authority is falling on their shoulders, and coalition provisional authority style, they're just winging it. All right. Albert Titus reminds us that, yes, it is the official Red Ryder carbine action 200-shot range model air rifle with a compass in the stock that we're talking about with the survival bow. And that thing tells time, right? So you never know. Or this thing does anyway. Yeah. It's entirely, it's not a bad product, I guess. How much does it go for? Does it say? How much? I'm curious. Reserve yours. They're not out yet. What if I clicked on to pre-order? Doesn't give me a price. Yeah, just give your email address and your name and reserve yours now. And I guess they just harvest that list. And I don't know what. I guess maybe they'll sell one to you later. Okay, very interesting. So they'll continue with their work, I'm sure. And you're invited. I'll say once again, do take a look at the article. We'll include it in the roundup, of course. And right up at the top, where is it that they listed the 400? Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all, the paragraphs aren't that long. The fifth paragraph down is the one that has the link to the more than 400 hires. I'm just curious, like, what if we took a look randomly? Like, let's scroll randomly into this and then click on somebody and see if we can Google them. It would have to be somebody with a unusual name, perhaps, and see if we can come up with anything on here. I don't know. Let's see. What's this one? Justin Biss, B-I-S. He is at the Energy Department, assistant to the secretary. Who's the Secretary of Energy? Oh, yeah, right. Oops, I forgot. that wasn't even intentional. Rick Perry. So an assistant to Rick Perry, a GS-10. Let's see, he's got 2 of them, a GS-14 and a GS-10. Tristan Abbey and Justin Biss. So I'm just curious, sort of at random. Let's Google them live on the air. Let's see, there was Justin Biss, B-I-S. That's not that common, I don't think. Here's a LinkedIn thing. Oh, and he's on Twitter. or at least somebody who's got that name is on Twitter. All right, let's see about this LinkedIn thing here. Yeah, there we go. That's probably the guy. It says Republican right up top. Deputy State Director at Ohio Republican Party. That's what's, I guess, listed currently, although he hasn't gone back and updated it. I assume this is the guy. Northern Michigan University, lived in Columbus, Ohio. Let's see. Deputy State Director of the Ohio Republican Party from July 2015 to December 2016. Before that, Deputy Statewide Field Director Hal Heiner for governor in Louisville, Kentucky. Any Kentuckians recognize that guy as being particularly heinous in any way? Deputy Statewide Field Director, Michigan Republican Party. He's just bouncing all over the place. So he's been in the Michigan Republican Party. Roslyn, any clue on this guy? Statewide Campus Coordinator, I guess, while he was in college, and the President of College Republicans. That's his basic background. Northern Michigan University, political science / pre-law graduate. Graduate. 2013. Activities and societies included College Republicans and Model UN. He's fun. Gulp. I hope I haven't insulted too many of you Model UN folks. So that's it. President of the College Republicans, statewide campus coordinator for Michigan Republican Party, deputy statewide field director of Michigan Republican Party. So in Republican politics in Michigan through February 2015, then off to Kentucky for a few months, then to Ohio for a year and a half. And then special assistant to Rick Perry. Anything else, though? I mean, LinkedIn isn't going to give me something really juicy. Let's see. There's a Justin Biss 2. Yeah, that's him. There he is. That's his Twitter account. So Justin, just how you'd think it would be spelled, Biss, B-I-S, and then the number 2 at the end. His avatar photo, he's a lovely fellow, and tall at that. He's standing with Donald Trump. So that's definitely him. Let's see, his last tweet, January 3rd, saying, "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The people have given us unified government. Now we must reach for that brighter horizon." So you can follow his foibles on Twitter if you like. How interesting. The things you learn. Now you can go and I guess the administration has probably already searched his Twitter feed for anything weird. Oh, look, we have a player here. Matthew Edmond tweets us this. You can follow along. Matthew Edmond 78. Mechanical engineer in North Carolina. Hello. He says, I Googled Jay French for the hell of it. He's a Maine campaign staffer for 3 months, 1 year out of college, assistant for agriculture. Yeah, nothing terribly damning so far. That's not to say we won't find one, but I guess they're all just, picked out of a hat, essentially. Oh, here's is this the same one? There's an entry on the knot for a wedding registry. I'm being voyeuristic here. I can't tell whether this is the same Justin Biss, but if it is, congratulations. He's getting married next September, or this coming September 30th, in Flanders, New Jersey. Presumably his bride to be Kaylee Waltz, W-O-L-Z, is from Flanders, New Jersey. If that's them, and if he does a good job, maybe you want to, thank him for it. I don't know whether it's the same Justin or not, but they're looking for an NFL New York Jets Royal plush racial R-A-S-C-H-E. I don't know what that throw. So they need a New York Jets blanket. You might want to give them that. Let's see. They're looking for a Home Medics quad shiatsu massage cushion with heat from Bed Bath & Beyond, and a Major League Baseball official New York Mets Game Time bowl. It is looks more like a pasta pot than a bowl, but it says bowl. A beer making kit. He wants to brew his own beer and watch the Mets and the Jets, and who could blame him except for the Jets, and really, quite honestly, the Mets. But I occasionally count myself a Mets fan from time to time. But anyway, other than that, lots of nice kitchen appliances that he'd like. And so, if he doesn't do anything terrible to policy, then maybe you want to think about congratulating him on a job well done. Or maybe you don't. There is a wedding site for them. Let's see. Oh, no, that looks like a different Justin Biss, if you ask me. This guy is much bigger and bearded. So leave them out of it. And you might be able to just go by and say, Kaylee and Justin, we're sorry we mistook you for the Justin Biss who was the field operative for the Ohio Republicans and is now a special assistant to the Secretary of Energy. And we to make it up to you, here's that Jets blanket you wanted. Let's see. Matthew says we need a Patreon campaign to purchase him registry items. The beer kit on behalf of Biden, that would be good. Well, we might as well send it to this Justin anyway, at least, if nothing else, in sympathy with the fact that he's got the same name as this other dude. And I know what that can be like. So now that we've made them famous on the radio, I think we owe them a gift or two. What about the other assistant here? Tristan Abbey. There's probably much more to find out about Justin, but I'm just curious. Let's Google her. I mean, why not? She's listed in the Congressional Staff Directory, and then she has a LinkedIn page too. She has updated hers, I think. No, she still has herself listed as Senior Professional Staff Member at the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. So it's not an unusual move, energy to energy, essentially. Let's see, 1 year and 7 months there. She was a regular professional staff member first. Then she became a senior one. She was 3 years and 2 months, so 3, 4, almost 5 years at the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate. Previously, summer associate at the Founders Fund. You'll have to Google what that is. Stanford University. It doesn't say graduate necessarily. It just says education, but we'll assume for the sake of argument that she's a graduate. Associate on Research and Trading at Clarium Capital Management for 11 solid months prior to that. Then 3 months as a summer associate someplace, whatever the Founders Fund is, and then Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and then top assistant to Rick Perry. So, okay, nothing terribly egregious, and we can't spend all day Googling these people, but maybe you can, or you can Google just a few of them. Look for goofy names that you think might get a hit. Martin Dannenfelser, for instance, another assistant to the Secretary of Energy. There's an awful lot of them here. Look at this. Look, just at Energy. Assistant to the Secretary, Tristan Abbey. Assistant to the Secretary, Justin Biss. Assistant to the Secretary, Sam Buchan, or Buchan, B-U-C-H-A-N. There's Hunter Budd. How about that one? B-U-D-D. Check him out. Joshua Campbell, Martin Dannenfelser, Brett Federley, Travis Fisher, Stanley Gerdes, William Green. That one you'll never track down. Kayla Hensley, Roger Jarrell. These are all just assistants to the Secretary. I guess that's probably not unusual. Suzanne Jaworski? No, Jaworski. Well, maybe that is just Jaworski. Spelled funny. Maybe this is the right way. It's spelled J-A-W-O-R, Jawor, O-W-S-K-I. I didn't know there was a second W in there. Patrick Johnson, Mark Maddox, Eric Maroom. Maroom, M-A-H-R-O-U-M. Check that guy out. He could be Muslim. Doug Matheny, Jake McCurdy, Taylor Playforth. Whew, that sounds weird. Daniel Simmons, Kathy Tripodi. Boy, there's a lot of assistants to the Secretary. Dan Wilmot, Kyle Unaxa. There's a bunch of senior advisors to him. Skipping over them. Huh. Well, anyway, it could be a fun weekend activity if your, definition of fun is God only knows what. Okay, so moving on from there, I just thought that was sort of an interesting intro. Great work that they did there, and good fuel for crowdsourced background checking on these people. Axios, I told you, had an entry in this area this morning. They needed to come back and win this morning. Axios writer Jonathan Swan writes, Trump's personnel problem. The Trump administration has a personnel problem. There you go. That's good. They tell you to put the purpose of your piece right up front, I guess, in journalism school. And he's done it, hasn't he? Multiple government agencies are in a state of staffing gridlock, with cabinet secretaries having, this is sort of a different angle, with cabinet secretaries having their chosen employees routinely returned by the White House's Office of Personnel Management. Steve Mnuchin at Treasury, Rex Tillerson at State, General Mattis, his name's Jim, I don't know why they don't use that, at Defense. It's a problem across the cabinet. Why this matters? The failure to fill lower-level staff directly impacts the ability of government to function. Career people are working away, but senior political appointees lack their own staff. They're less effective. Doesn't sound like Rick Perry lacks staff, but and operating in a climate of distrust until they've got their team around them. One example, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, confirmed only a week ago, has already taken his complaints directly to the president. I'm sure that endeared him tremendously to the president. According to a source briefed on the incident, Zinke went to Trump and demanded his staff be approved. Trump replied that Zinke will get his people, quote, as long as there are people, unquote, the source said. An Interior Department spokeswoman didn't deny the incident happened. Our source explained, if you want somebody, that's fine, but they have to be vetted. Because, one, Zinke is not the president. That is true. That's a good point. This is a presidential personnel, and they keep having this conversation with the department secretaries and administrators, and it's just not clicking. Interesting how closely they guard this stuff. But it is a president's prerogative to make sure that they're decent people. But it is, one, he's not coming up with decent people. He means coming up with craven, disgusting people who will do whatever you tell them. And apparently they're having difficulty finding enough of them. I guarantee you they're out there, though. All you have to do is, hire all the college Republicans, I guess. Other departments having similar problems. Let's say Treasury has been having major headaches in getting Mnuchin people confirmed. Bloomberg chronicled the problems exhaustively in a linked article, and we've been hearing the same things. The White House has been irritated that Mnuchin has been asking for people viewed as liberals, or in one case, a Hillary Clinton donor. Treasury, which Donald Trump is, by the way. If that were a criterion, they could bounce him right out of government, too. Treasury spokesman Jason Chung denied there were any problems and said Mnuchin could not be happier with how the appointment and nomination process is going. One reason for that may be in a piece that I put aside, and now I want to dive out of this one and at least mention that this looms out there. Where is this? Oh, yes. Well, there's a Bloomberg piece that's entitled, I think the title may have changed, entitled, Questions About Loyalty to Trump Stole Mnuchin's Treasury Picks. So that must be the Bloomberg piece that they were referring to in the Axiom piece. But there was is this the one that had the video? There was an interesting video in one of these pieces. Yeah, this is it. That maybe this wasn't the same video. Maybe Bloomberg just has all videos in all of their pieces. But there was something out there. No, I don't want to hear this. His department. I'm telling you, be quiet. There was another piece about sort of how Mnuchin sort of rode his loyalty to Trump into a government position in the first place. Like, why is he the Treasury Department, Treasury Secretary at all? And it was very interesting in sort of outlining what it took to turn Mnuchin from a fellow billionaire, if Donald Trump is a billionaire, and vague admirer of Donald Trump's into a key loyalist and then eventually Treasury Secretary. And it was a really interesting piece, but I at the time, it was just sort of like, well, okay, so he kissed his ass really well, so they turned him into the Treasury Secretary, and I don't think I put it aside. But now, in light of this story, it's very interesting that, it's not entirely clear that Mnuchin comes from the same place, despite the fact that he's a Wall Streeter, despite the fact that he's a billionaire, despite the fact that he made a lot of his money trading on his privilege and his father's name and stealing money from people, that does, ordinarily would put him in close orbit to Donald Trump. But, he's got his own background, and being from New York and being from Wall Street, that does sometimes tie him to a number of more liberal types and Democrats in particular. And Trump got what he wanted out of him in terms of some legitimacy and then loyalty. But then I guess it should come as no surprise that when it comes to trying to bring his own people on board, they don't make the cut under, Trump's delusional version of vetting. Very interesting. All right. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson apparently also having difficulties overseeing a department that one source described as utterly dispirited. Of course, those are the among the most dedicated, long-term, really avowedly nonpartisan government employees around the State Department. Breitbart twisted the knife on Tuesday with the headline, "Obama holdover literally represents President Trump," Secretary Tillerson at first State Department briefing. The briefer, Mark Toner, is actually a career Foreign Service officer, not a political appointee, who also briefed during the Obama administration. That's the problem. See, Breitbart thinks anybody who also worked during the Obama administration is an Obama appointee, though that's not the case. They don't understand the difference between career Foreign Service or career government service and political appointees, nor do they understand that sometimes people could be brought into the administration by George W. Bush, held over as a career government service employee through the Obama years, and now into the Trump years. They worked in the Obama administration. Yeah, but they were brought in by George Bush. Well, that's okay. He was a rhino anyway. Let's see. Also, Defense Secretary, and it just says, again, they just refer to him as General Mattis. You got to stop doing that. There's a reason why he's not a general at the moment. So Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, I'll help him with that one, has been having trouble too. We're told a number of his picks have been deemed politically unacceptable. Team Trump's perspective is these secretaries have these egos, that this is their little kingdom now. Well, that's usually the way it works. And it's their way or the highway, so it's been creating a logjam, one source said. No way will the White House rubber stamp Hillary people, never Trumpers, and flat-out liberals. The agency view is this is a dysfunctional White House. It needs to get over the bruising primary race and accept that a person's past political views doesn't disqualify them from the administration. After all, the man himself is having dinner with Lion Ted Cruz, right? The man stuck in the middle of all this, John DeStefano, the director of presidential personnel, says a source close to the situation, it's just creating basically a standstill in personnel movement going back and forth because the White House isn't going to blink because they don't care whether the government works or not. Yes. So, very interesting as well. I wonder if I can come up with that Bloomberg piece quickly and easily. Probably not. Let's see. There are a couple other interesting bits here. Other big news of the day, by the way, and you can tell it's big news because it's covered here by the Associated Press as the big story at bigstory.ap.org. You've all heard it by now. It's shocking nonetheless, and so we have to mention it at least and put it on the record. Former Trump aide Mike Flynn, that would be National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, says lobbying may have helped Turkey. That's a hell of a way of putting it in the headline. The bottom line of this story is better put, I think, in the lead here. President Donald Trump's former National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, who was fired from his prominent White House job last month, has registered, just now, registered with the Justice Department as a foreign agent for $530,000 worth of lobbying work done before Election Day that may have aided the Turkish government. Oh, P.S., your National Security Advisor wants you to know that he hasn't said anything about it to this point, but just before you asked me to come in here and be your National Security Advisor, I was the paid agent of the Turkish government, and I don't know why I didn't tell you that. I really feel like I probably should have at some point, but I guess I didn't get around to it. Paperwork filed Tuesday with the Justice Department's Foreign Agent Registration Unit said Flynn and his firm were voluntarily registering for lobbying from August through November that, quote, could be construed to have principally benefited the Republic of Turkey. It was filed by a lawyer on behalf of the former U.S. Army Lieutenant General and Intelligence Chief. After his firm's work on behalf of a Turkish company was done, Flynn agreed not to lobby for 5 years after leaving government service. You probably thought that would last longer. And never to represent foreign governments. Under the Foreign Agent Registration Act, U.S. citizens who lobby on behalf of foreign governments or political entities must disclose their work to the Justice Department. Willfully failing to register is a felony. Though the Justice Department rarely files criminal charges in such cases, it routinely works with lobbying firms to get back in compliance with the law by registering and disclosing their work. So, forgot to tell you, but at least I told you now. Very interesting. There's more to that story, of course, but I just wanted to note that headline. At the very least, here's another personnel story that I think is somewhat interesting and helps round out. I don't make a theme out of this. Personnel's not, necessarily the most exciting stuff, but really, this would help fill out the picture here. Oh, by the way, here's a nice comment. Good observation. A couple things that came in. First of all, let's see. Ricky says from up in Canada, yes, by the way, the Red Ryder carbine action 200-shot range model air rifle with a compass in the stock, that is, in fact, the gun that Ralphie wanted from A Christmas Story. That's what Albert's talking about, so your suspicions are correct there. Jeffrey Houlihan, if you're looking for the Twitter handle, good suggestion. Can you please have someone make a button for a link to the Kagro in the Morning live stream more obvious or prominent on the web page? Thank you. That's a good point. I forget what we have over at Daily Kos. When we first proposed this thing, I thought it would make a great idea to have a big button on there that would say Daily Kos Radio is live now. And I guess one of the problems in building the thing was that putting a button on the front page that simply linked you directly to the live stream created some issues. Not necessarily technical issues so much as branding issues. I'll have to sort of reopen the negotiations on that, such as it was. These are the things that don't really occur to you until you try and do something like this. But the idea, I guess one of the difficulties was all the engineering of the show, the live stream. It takes place, the back end, at Netroots Radio. And they do a great job of it, and it's a robust platform and it doesn't cause any technical problems. But I think there was some question, at least at the outset, when we were all still getting to know one another, of putting a giant button on the front page that leads you to an outside engineering back end that isn't Daily Kos branded property either. So, there's some, I don't know what you would say, corporate politics issues to it, I suppose, but also, I guess, originally at least, some engineering questions about that. I wonder if that's something we can reopen. It's a good point. Thanks very much for making it, Jeff, and we'd do well to have it, wouldn't we? All right. Well, anyway, moving on here. I thought this was an interesting piece. Did I not get the full text of this thing? We might have to read it in the pocket version, because it's coming from the Wall Street Journal. Anthony Scaramucci, does that name ring a bell for you? We haven't talked about him a great deal on this show. But he apparently, a big deal hedge fund guy, was supposed to come on board in the administration and is having some problems. I thought this was kind of interesting. It says, Anthony Scaramucci loses White House communications post. What happened? Did they check out his background and find something? No. He just took too damn long. And it's interesting why. Scaramucci, it says here, is blindsided by the appointment of, instead, George Sifakis to the role that he, Scaramucci, had been offered in January. How do you like that? Financier Anthony Scaramucci's move from Wall Street to Washington has become unlikely after the Trump administration communications job he was offered in January was handed to someone else. This reported by Lisa Bilfus over at the Wall Street Journal. Let me see if I can get the entirety of the article to open up here. Oh, apparently not. I think I saw it last night, but now instead they're making it a subscription article. That's too bad. But as I recall from skimming it last night, the story was that, and by the way, he's a financier, yes, but he is the founder of Skybridge Capital in particular, in case you want to look that one up. Apparently the problem was they offered him this job. Here he is, the founder of Skybridge Capital, this hedge fund, and this just goes to show you how ridiculously stupid this guy is, huh? I'll tell you. I don't know. He decided, I am going to divest myself of my assets so as not to have the conflicts of interest that everyone accuses Donald Trump of having. I don't know whether Donald Trump insisted on it or whether he just said, that's the way it's really supposed to be, and I actually care about that stuff, so I'm going to do it. Well, it takes a while as the founder of a hedge fund to simply sell it off and get a decent price for it, get what you believe it's worth. And in the time it took him to try and make that sale, the Trump administration, because what does he care? Trump himself didn't divest himself of anything, so he doesn't have any patience for how long that actually takes. He doesn't care. He didn't do it and doesn't care if you do either. I guess they got fed up waiting and they gave the job to this George Safakis guy instead. How would you like that? To have your company on the auction block, and I guess thankfully, for him, he hasn't sold it yet. I guess he could walk away and go back to the hedge fund life. But apparently, the article, as I understand it, said that there was another job in the offing for him, and so he may not necessarily be completely out of luck on that score if he wants to move into another job. But how would you like that? If you go through the exercise of actually trying to divest yourself of your assets so that you can do the job the way it's supposed to be done, and the president, who didn't bother doing all of that, gets fed up and decides not to hire you after all. I actually feel bad somehow for this guy, and I probably, if I knew more about him, would immediately not feel all that bad for him. I'm ready to just assume that I don't, I guess, and I'll just jump straight to that. And if you know a little bit more about Scaramucci, you can tell me why I shouldn't be feeling sorry for him. I'm sure you'll find a sympathetic ear on that one. Let's see. Another entry in the Russia, what will we call it? Imbroglio. That's a word I haven't used yet. Let's try that one. I feel like we might be seeing another name emerging here to keep an eye on, and I like to keep tabs on these things so that you guys all feel like you're up to speed when major news breaks and a new name enters the arena, and we've already heard of it. Authorities looked into already, Manafort protege, this reported by Politico, Ken Vogel and David Stern writing this one, an associate of an ex-Trump campaign chairman, is suspected of, you'll never guess, connections to Russian intelligence. All right, you'll guess. U.S. and Ukrainian authorities have expressed interest in the activities of a Kiev-based operative with suspected ties to Russian intelligence, not mob, maybe the same thing, but this says intelligence, who consulted regularly with Paul Manafort last year while Manafort was running Donald Trump's presidential campaign. The operative, his name is Konstantin Kilimnik. It's my best stab at it. It's not too hard. Konstantin Kilimnik came under scrutiny from officials at the FBI and the State Department partly because of at least 2 trips he took to the U.S. during the presidential campaign, according to 3 international political operatives familiar with the agency's interest in Kilimnik. It's Kilimnik, by the way. Kilimnik, a joint Russian-Ukrainian citizen, that's got to be touchy, who trained in the Russian army as a linguist, told operatives in Kiev and Washington that he met with Manafort during an April trip to the United States, and after a late summer trip to the U.S., Kilimnik suggested that he had played a role in gutting a proposed amendment to the Republican Party platform that would have staked out a more adversarial stance toward Russia, according to a Kiev operative. That, of course, being the key provision, apparently to somebody, of the Republican platform that was the only thing to receive any attention from the Trump camp at the convention. So apparently, Konstantin Kilimnik is the guy from the Russian side who came to speak to people on the U.S. side about that platform plank. The FBI declined to comment on him. While the State Department did not respond to any request for comment, it's unclear whether either agency launched any kind of official inquiry into Kilimnik, nor is it clear whether the interest from the U.S. authorities is ongoing. The Ukrainian Prosecutor General in August did launch a formal investigation into Kilimnik's suspected ties to Russian intelligence, according to documents obtained by Politico. The prosecutor's office subsequently told Politico that it has cleared Kilimnik, though the Ukrainian parliamentarian who requested the investigation questioned its thoroughness and suggested the agency was trying to avoid an investigation that could have had implications in the U.S. presidential race. The revelations about the authorities' interest in Kilimnik come amid ongoing FBI and congressional investigations into Russia's alleged meddling in the presidential race, as well as probes into ties between Russia and President Trump's associates. Trump, who has downplayed U.S. intelligence findings that Russia interfered in the election, has blasted the investigations as a witch hunt, and on Saturday, Trump accused former President Barack Obama, without evidence, of ordering the tapping of phones at Trump's New York campaign headquarters. Manafort summarily rejected questions about whether Kilimnik might be in league with Russian intelligence, declaring Kilimnik pro-Ukraine and casting the inquiries into his associate as politically motivated smears. Kilimnik declined to answer questions about any interest by authorities in his activities. Instead, he attributed scrutiny of him to a heated political environment that has led to exaggerated and out-of-control reporting in the hope of establishing connections that, to the best of my knowledge, have not yet been proven. That is an extraordinarily convoluted denial. He added that Ukraine and Ukrainians are being used as scapegoats in the U.S. political and media battles, a dynamic that he said has been made abundantly evident by how my own circumstantial relationships were misrepresented, exaggerated, and overblown. This guy speaks better English than our president. The White House declined to respond to questions, I don't wanna, that's how they put it, about Manafort's relationship with Kilimnik or whether there were any inquiries into it by U.S. authorities. But two international political consultants who work in Kiev, and who knows why we shouldn't trust those guys, said that the U.S. authorities have become increasingly interested in Kilimnik after his April 2016 trip. Several people said Kilimnik told them he met with Manafort during that trip, which came as Manafort was guiding Trump's campaign through the bitter Republican presidential primaries and trying to distance himself from his work in Ukraine. Their relationship goes back to 2005 when Manafort hired Kilimnik to work for him in Ukraine after Kilimnik was forced out of a position that he had held for about a decade in Moscow with the U.S.-based International Republican Institute amid suspicion over his ties to Russia. Isn't that interesting that they used to kick you out of those things? Now, his ties to Russia. So he's Russian and Ukrainian, and he's working for the International Republican Institute in Moscow, and we suspect he may be tied to Russia. Yes, he might be. He's Russian, and he lives in Moscow. Manafort and Kilimnik, I don't even understand that exactly. Manafort and Kilimnik were part of a group that formed a private equity fund. How do you like that? That used millions of dollars contributed by the Russian oligarch, Oleg Deripaska. I say not because his name is hard to pronounce, but because, a Russian oligarch is involved again. So let's see. They used Deripaska's money to purchase a Ukrainian cable and internet company. And they did work on behalf of the businesses owned by Ukrainian oligarch Rinat Akhmetov. We'll guess at that one. Their work in Ukraine became political when Akhmetov began funding the political comeback of former Ukrainian Prime Minister Viktor Yanukovych. Boy, oh boy. With Manafort's help, Yanukovych was elected Prime Minister in 2006, President in 2010, as leader of the Russia-aligned Party of Regions. That is a weird name. Multiple sources said the party paid millions of dollars a year to Manafort's firm, for which Kilimnik eventually came to run the Kiev office. Manafort stressed that his work in Ukraine was intended to steer Yanukovych towards more pro-Western policies, you see, and more engagement with the European Union. Kalimnik told Politico that one thing that was grossly underreported to date is the effort that Paul Manafort undertook to help Ukrainian leaders defend Ukraine's interests and move the country towards a European free trade agreement. Well, we'll see about that one. Anyway, by way of background, it does go on to say Yanukovych in 2013 backed away from a commitment to that agreement and then fled Ukraine for Russia under the protection of Vladimir Putin amid widespread protests over government corruption. So there you go. There's more, of course, but I wanted to at least put the guy's name on the record so that if something explodes with him over the weekend, you'll feel like you're at least somewhat in the know. Here's an interesting story, maybe, to help close things out. This one, let's see if you can come up with an alternative explanation. The Hill. And we get some of our more interesting things from The Hill, even though I pretend to not like them very much, and sometimes I really don't. This is a new one. China gives Trump preliminary approval for 38 new trademarks. I think we made mention of the fact that he was getting preferential treatment on trademarks a while back, and there's a very thorough story on the granting of one trademark in particular that seemed to be very troubling, very important to Trump, and he'd been pursuing it for the longest time, and it raised all sorts of emoluments, red flags. Let me see if I can scroll back. I think that one had a pretty recognizable headline here somewhere, but anyway, it was a big deal, and it was sort of like this very obvious thing. He'd been fighting for this trademark for something like 10 years, and then all of a sudden got it. Yeah, the New York Times covered a while back, making a particular point of, gee whiz, all of a sudden this very complex process of getting a trademark for a foreign interest in China all of a sudden cleared all the hurdles, lo and behold, for Donald Trump. Okay, so we figured it was for like a Trump hotel or something, right? And in part it is. But 38 new trademarks. Well, he every time he starts a new company, it really gets split into 15, 20 new companies so he can move the money around. So 38 new trademarks, maybe ones for each floor of the hotel or something dumb like that. Now, it turns out he's seeking trademarks for a lot more. And I would love for somebody to suggest to me a really good reason why Trump would be seeking to trademark his name for some of these purposes. This is great. They sort of mention it. They list it. And like, oh, whatever. We don't know why. China has granted preliminary approval to 38 new Trump-related trademarks. Fine. As President Trump's family works to develop a series of branded products in the country, including hotel chains. Makes sense, right? Insurance. Really? And this is out of order. I moved one to the end for dramatic effect. Escort services. What? Escort services. Yeah. Trump branded escort services. We're seeking the trademark for that. Now, I guess maybe the best non-incriminating explanation could be, well, we wanted to trademark Trump for use on escort services so that if somebody else, as a nefarious actor, were to open a escort service and call it Trump Escort Services in order to try to capitalize on our name, we would be able to shut that down because we hold the copyright on it, or the trademark on it. That's actually possible. I didn't want to suggest it necessarily, but if they're having a Trump Escort Service, I'd like to know about it. And I think everybody here in America would too. Maybe that's the explanation. Trump's lawyers in China applied for the trademarks in April of last year. Associated Press reported on Wednesday. So April of last year. So he's in the middle of the race and he's doing this. The new trademarks are considered by some to be a conflict of interest, especially as 3 of the trademarks were specifically made under the president's name. The approval is preliminary and will be formally registered in 90 days if no one objects to the trademarks. I object. Hong Kong intellectual property officials told the AP that the trademarks were approved unusually quickly. That's really not the issue. It's the escort thing. What about that? The Trump-branded businesses planned in China. I mean, really, honestly, if you put it that way, the Trump-branded businesses planned in China include spas, massage parlors, Oh, that could be troublesome. Escort services. Well, in combination, that's awful. Hotels. Well, that's where that stuff happens. I guess finance, in case you need to pay for it, and real estate companies. Retail shops, restaurants, and bars. Spring Chang, a partner at the Beijing law firm that has represented the Trump organization, told the AP that she didn't see any special treatment in trademark cases. Conflicts of interest have been a concern since Trump won the presidency last November. In January, Trump announced he was creating a blind trust, that put in scare quotes, of course, with his children to take over the Trump organization and related family-owned companies. That was bull, and everybody knows it. Now we'll just end the article there. But how do you like that? I'm curious how you get around that construction. Maybe it's just a mistake, but Trump branded businesses planned for China include spas, massage parlors, and escort services. You tell me what the hell that's supposed to mean. And I found out about that just yesterday, and that was not really the best day to find out about that. Although maybe they're all male escorts. I don't know. Anyway, I just found that was rather interesting, and I thought that you might think so too. It is about time to hand over the reins of the not that easy to find streaming button on our front page, very true, to the guys on the after show. Is there anything else that, maybe we should open this one up so I have it here for the roundup here. Anything else we can squeeze in or that we thought was particularly important for today's show? Well, it doesn't really matter at this point because time's a running out. Hope we did the best we could here for you on these strange personnel issues. I'll try and find that loyalty piece on Steve Mnuchin if it's not, in fact, the one I'm thinking of here. And we'll get back to a little bit of personnel issues perhaps later on in the week. That would be tomorrow's show as we take a look. There's a little Hill profile here of the meet the Trump pick who could end up leading the Russia probe now that Sessions has recused himself. You'll recall this is the Deputy Attorney General whose nomination the Judiciary Committee is now considering. Oh, let's get back to our outro music and make sure we get out of here closer to on time. Maybe I'll just toss that in here in case we don't get to it tomorrow. But a quick look at the background of Rod Rosenstein, who was mentioned yesterday and whose hearings began. And hopefully, the autoplay is on this one. So we'll turn that one off and head over to the after show preview. It's Thursday, of course. That means it's time to speak a little Italian and say it's thank God it's Giovedì.
Let me be
That's
clear.
What we call it. There's that.
I never
that video
had
after all.
meetings
Okay.
with Russian operatives
Get the hell out
or
of here,
Russian
bums. Oh goodness, it's taken forever to turn it off. Okay, the Energy Star Efficiency Program. Speaking of energy, right? Costs less than 0.001% of the Department of Defense budget, which means, of course, it has to be cut to fight radical Islamic terrorism. Trump's tax records could be the next Pentagon Papers, they say, and GOP lawmakers are about to pass 2 laws that will make it nearly impossible to sue corporations. And why would anybody ever need to sue a corporation? On the last half, they'll be reporting that San Francisco has asked a federal judge to block the Trump order penalizing sanctuary cities, and America has a long history of anti-refugee policies. It's always worth reviewing to remind ourselves of the foibles of our own history. All of that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Coast Community Calendar, and more on the After Show with Wink and Justice next.
From Daily Coast Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. I remind you, as always, that our Patreon.com page is up, patreon.com/KagroX, and a new service that allows you to make one-time donations instead of using PayPal, Square Cash. You can find those in all of our morning posts and evening roundups.